Harlequin ichthyosis. Harlequin ichthyosis is one of the rarest and most horrifying illnesses where babies are born with thick, armor-like plates of skin with deep cracks. The illness was first documented by Reverend Oliver Hart from Charleston, South Carolina. Oliver described in his diary his first encounter with a harlequin ichthyosis, stating, "On Thursday, April the 5th, 1750, I went to see a most deplorable object of a child, born the night before of one Mary Evans in Chastown. It was surprising to all who beheld it, and I scarcely know how to describe it. The skin was dry and hard, and seemed to be cracked in many places, somewhat resembling the scales of a fish. The mouth was large and round and open. It had no external nose, but 2 holes where the nose should have been. The eyes appeared to be lumps of coagulated blood turned out about the bigness of a plum, ghastly to behold. It had no external ears, but holes where the ears should be. The hands and feet appeared to be swollen, were cramped up, and felt quite hard. The back part of the head was much open. It made a strange kind of noise, very low, which I cannot describe. It lived about 48 hours and was alive when I saw it." You see, babies with harlequin ichthyosis are usually born prematurely and pretty much in a terrifying condition. Up until the 1980s, the survival rate was heartbreakingly low, and most newborns would die within just a few days. Their skin appears so tight and hard that it cracks deeply, forming painful-looking splits. Even worse, the tightness pulls at their faces, fusing their ears to their heads in some cases, and sometimes turning their eyelids and lips inside out, also stretching their chest and stomach, making it very hard for them to breathe or eat. A real-life example of this is Lauren, interviewed on the YouTube channel Special Books by Special Kids. Lauren is currently a teenager, and her condition has practically improved due to advanced treatment approaches toward the illness. Unlike symptoms at birth, where children with the illness appear to have swollen hands and feet, poorly developed ears, a flat or underdeveloped nose, total hair loss, diamond-shaped plates formed from deep cracks, and thick, extremely tight skin. For Lauren and others like her, daily life is focused on managing the condition, up to a 2-hour bathing ritual, followed by applying thick creams and ointments to keep the skin hydrated and remove scales. In some cases, special care and regular visits to specialists are needed to prevent infections, especially for those who cannot fully close their eyes, leaving them exposed and vulnerable to further complications. Presently, harlequin ichthyosis has no cure, and as to what causes it, a mutation in the ABCA12 gene is a major factor. The ABCA12 gene gives the body instructions for making a protein that's vital for the development of healthy skin cells. Patients who have harlequin ichthyosis have abnormally small amounts of the ABCA12 protein, or none at all, disrupting the normal development of their epidermis, leading to the severe symptoms that the condition produces. The condition is inherited, with patients receiving each copies of the affected gene, one from each parent. For those living with harlequin ichthyosis, life becomes a performance of endurance, and though medical science has made and is still making progress, we hope they find a true cure soon. Rett syndrome. Rett syndrome is one of those conditions that doesn't reveal its cruelty at birth. In fact, most babies with Rett syndrome are born appearing completely healthy. They smile, they cry, they hit all the early milestones. For a brief moment, everything seems normal. But then, something changes. By the time the child is around 6 to 18 months old, a slow, heartbreaking regression begins. Skills that were once there, grasping toys, sitting up, crawling, even babbling, starts to fade away. It's like watching the lights dim on a child who was just starting to bloom. Hands that once reached out now twist and wring in repetitive, uncontrollable motions, almost as if the child is trying to fight something within. Communication stops, eye contact in most cases fades, and in many cases walking becomes difficult or impossible. Some children develop seizures, breathing problems, and even issues with their heart rhythm.
A classic child with Rett syndrome is in a wheelchair, unable to speak, fed through a feeding tube, seizures, anxiety, orthopedic issues, scoliosis, contractures, and no hand function.
For parents, it's a slow, silent horror. There's no accident, no obvious trauma, just a child gradually slipping away piece by piece. This illness was first described in 1966 by Dr. Andreas Rett. Rett reported in German his findings on this syndrome in 22 patients. By 1987, the number of known cases had grown to over 1,250 worldwide, leading to the formation of the International Rett Syndrome Association, where international conferences on the illness were being held regularly. As to its cause, Rett syndrome is caused by a mutation in the MECP2 gene, critical for brain development and function. When mutated, the brain loses the ability to properly regulate other genes, leading to its formation. The most disturbing fact about Rett syndrome is that it almost exclusively affects girls, and boys born with the same mutation usually don't survive infancy. As it turns out, this condition is not inherited. It happens randomly as a spontaneous genetic mutation. And for those living with Rett syndrome, life becomes a series of routines designed to manage symptoms, as there is presently no known cure. These routines include daily physical therapy to prevent muscles from weakening, constant monitoring for seizures, and special feeding tubes for those who lose the ability to eat safely. Patients with the disease also require communication tools, like eye tracking devices for those who can no longer speak. And in many cases, 24/7 care is required, often for life. However, despite how devastating Rett syndrome is, there is hope. Recent research into gene therapy and protein replacement therapy has shown promising results in reversing some symptoms. Until then, we can only hope that a permanent cure is found, and soon to end the suffering caused by this horrifying illness. Brewery syndrome. Imagine this. You're living your life, going about your daily routine when suddenly you start feeling dizzy, disoriented, and most disturbingly drunk. But there's one glaring issue. You haven't had a single drop of alcohol, yet you can't shake the overwhelming feeling of intoxication. For some, this is their reality, an inexplicable and terrifying medical condition known as brewery syndrome, ABS. The first cases of this illness began surfacing in the 1990s, but it wasn't until years later that doctors truly began to understand what was happening inside the bodies of those affected. What they discovered was both bizarre and unsettling. The sufferers of ABS had an overgrowth of yeast in their digestive system, particularly in the gut, allowing their body to ferment sugars into alcohol. This process is similar to how alcohol is made. Yeast consumes sugars and produces alcohol as a byproduct. But in these cases, it was happening inside the body. Patients suffering from ABS would unknowingly experience this internal fermentation, their bodies producing alcohol in quantities that is pretty much enough to leave them feeling drunk, even if they hadn't consumed a drop of alcohol. A typical case is Alyssa, a woman from Ohio. Alyssa had rendered complaints of sudden, unexplained drunkenness.
Basically, if I eat sugar or carbs and pretty much any grain, it can turn it into alcohol in my small intestine. It won't digest, it'll just start fermenting.
She had no history of alcohol abuse and had never been a heavy drinker. Yet she would always smell like alcohol, slurring her speech and feeling completely out of control. When doctors finally investigated, they discovered high levels of ethyl alcohol in her blood. Tests revealed that her gut was housing an overgrowth of yeast that had turned her body into a literal brewery. Apparently, she was brewing alcohol internally. As to its cause, one theory suggests that the condition stems from an imbalance in the gut due to stress, diet, or frequent use of antibiotics. And while brewery syndrome may sound like something out of a medical thriller, it's all too real for those who suffer from it. The emotional and psychological toll can be just as severe as the physical symptoms. To manage ABS, antifungal medicine like fluconazole to patient to stop the gut from making alcohol. Probiotics is also given to help restore good bacteria in the gut, and a high-protein, low-carb diet is prescribed to help prevent symptoms. The story of brewery syndrome remains one of the most unsettling medical illness, one that leaves us questioning the true limits of what our bodies are capable of and how much we really know about the inner workings of our own flesh and blood. Human werewolf syndrome. Human werewolf syndrome, also known as hypertrichosis, is one of the most eerie conditions in the world of rare diseases. Hypertrichosis is an incredibly rare genetic disorder that causes excessive hair growth on areas of the body where hair normally doesn't appear, or in quantities that are so intense they seem unnatural. The first known case of hypertrichosis was Petrus Gonsalves from the Canary Islands. A scientist named Ulisse Aldrovandi recorded his condition in 1642, noting that several of Gonsalves' children and a grandchild also had it. But it's not just the quantity of hair that makes it unsettling, it's the appearance of it. The hair tends to grow long and thick, creating a werewolf look that is both fascinating and frightening. Hypertrichosis can be present at birth or acquired later in life due to illness, medication, or even trauma. For those with congenital hypertrichosis, this is a lifelong reality. As they grow older, the hair continues to thicken and spread, often making it more difficult to manage. Medical treatments such as laser hair removal or electrolysis can help reduce hair growth in some cases, but they don't always completely eliminate it. And not all patients have access to such treatments, leaving them to cope with the constant reminder of their condition. PRADA-WILLI syndrome. Prader-Willi syndrome is a condition that traps its victims in an unrelenting cycle of hunger and uncontrollable cravings. Imagine living every moment with the sensation of an empty stomach, yet no matter how much food you consume, the feeling never goes away. Individuals with PWS are unable to sense when they are full. Their brains don't register satiety, and as a result, they experience hyperphagia, an uncontrollable desire to eat. This constant hunger leads to an extreme obsession with food. People with Prader-Willi syndrome may seek out food obsessively, driven by the need to satisfy an unrelenting craving. This compulsion doesn't just cause physical harm, as individuals with PWS are at an increased risk of obesity, diabetes, and life-threatening conditions related to overeating, also creating a psychological and emotional burden. While the hunger is perhaps the most infamous symptom of Prader-Willi syndrome, it's far from the only one. You see, individuals with PWS often exhibit mild to moderate intellectual disabilities, typically with a lower IQ. This cognitive impairment, combined with behavioral challenges, creates a complex web of difficulties that can make daily life unpredictable and exhausting for both the person with the syndrome and their caregivers. Patients struggle with impulse control, temper, stubbornness, and obsessive-compulsive behaviors. For those living with PWS, managing the syndrome requires a highly structured and controlled environment. Strict supervision is necessary to ensure that individuals don't engage in unsafe eating practices. Often, a carefully regulated diet is essential, along with constant monitoring of weight, physical health, and behavior. While progress is being made in medical research, the psychological toll of living with Prader-Willi syndrome is immeasurable. But with love, care, and a strong support system, it is possible for individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome to live fulfilling lives.